We've all been following a story now for a little bit of time, a story of biblical proportions playing out on the world stage. It's the story of Daystar. It's a story that's got some deceptive parts to it. It has intrigue. It has a massive amount of wealth. And it has a family at the core of it. Earlier today, I have had the privilege of speaking with Jonathan and Suzy Lamb. Jonathan and Suzy Lamb were destined to become the leaders of Daystar and now find themselves in a position of having to give it all up in order to speak the truth. This is how my interview began with Jonathan and Suzy Lamb. Jonathan and Suzy, I am so very glad to finally be able to meet you in person, even though it's over video. And I just want to say, particularly to you, Jonathan, I want to let you know how impressed I've been at your spirit and your kindness, your respect, your true submission, in spite of what's been said. It's been an incredible thing to watch. I'm really glad to be able to finally speak to the two of you because I see as a couple, you are an incredible couple. You are submitted to God and you want to see the right thing come out of all of this. And I don't know how it feels for you all that all of North America is weighing in on your situation. Thousands and thousands of comments on the videos. Let me just check in with you right now. Like, how's it going for you?
Well, first of all, Laura, I just wanted to thank you for being a bold truth teller and being willing to go against powerful people who may not want you to be speaking about this issue and they'd rather it just go away and never be spoken about again. But again, I love that you have a desire for justice, for righteousness, and the truth, and you will boldly do whatever it takes to get to the bottom of certain issues and find out the truth. So thank you for that, Ms. Laura.
Yes. You're so welcome. You know what I keep hearing you guys always say is Daystar is God's. And let's remember that as we're all grappling with some of the things that have been happening. God raised Daystar in order to be, maybe a voice for him. And somewhere along the line, something very difficult has happened. And so I was thinking about it, and I'd like to present it, and I want to ask you guys if you think this is it. So, for instance, if Joni, your mom, had never pushed that you have to read this comment, if she had just respected that, is there a possibility that none of this would have happened?
Yes, Miss Laura, that is actually a very reasonable possibility, simply because, again, the way we were conditioned, my whole life, I've done nothing but fully trust my parents to a level that was almost like unhealthy. Like there wasn't any skepticism about any decisions that they made. And so whenever my father had sat me down in his office and told me that Pete had been cleared by this forensic counselor, instead of doing whatever it took to uncover the truth at that time, we just moved forward as best we could within the family system that we were in. And that's a family system that's very tight knit. We all work together, and there's a lot of fear of if you ever do anything that goes against my parents, the fear of retribution was always there. So again, that led to us going down the route that we did. So not until my mother made the decision to marry Doug Weiss, a decision that we shared we had a 3-hour discussion with my mom and Jimmy Evans and Doug and kind of laid everything out on the table as to what our concerns were. I wrote her a beautiful letter also after that meeting to let her know, again, one final plea to Mom, I don't believe this is God's best for you. I urge you not to move forward with this. And that is the reason why I cannot walk you down the aisle. I said, I love you, Mom. You have your free will. And it's between you and God who you marry. But as your son and someone that loves you more than anybody in this world, I cannot endorse this marriage. I think it'll be one of the biggest mistakes of your life. But she continued to move forward, and obviously that led to a point where whenever they got back from the honeymoon, not maybe a week or two after that, my mom and Doug were the hosts, and Suzy and I were asked to read a viewer comment that was praising my mother's marriage. And Suzy and I simply asked the producer kindly, "Hey, we don't feel comfortable reading this viewer feedback comment. Could you please exchange it for another viewer feedback comment?" Because we get obviously thousands of emails from viewers, and we could have read feedback about any other part of the ministry. However, my mom decided to put her foot down, and she said to the producer, "Tell them they can read that comment or they'll be cut from the show." And so we just said, "I'm sorry, we can't read this." So that led to us departing the studio, and then ultimately my mother, to address that whole situation, she called me and Suzy into a meeting in her office. And when we got there, unbeknownst to us, there's Jimmy Evans. And of course, that is the infamous 90-minute meeting that is on the internet with hundreds of thousands of views, where we were constantly told to submit at all costs. I think over 100 times we were told to submit in that 90-minute meeting. And, the intention was obviously to break our will, to go against our convictions. Either submit or leave was what they were saying. And I just said, "Mom, I can't submit, but I'm not going to leave, because I know this is God's calling for me. I've known ever since I was a young boy that I would continue on, the legacy of Marcus Lamb, and serve and continue the great ministry that we have here. We can agree to disagree about your marriage. I just ask that you don't make us publicly endorse the marriage." But she said that if you don't believe God sent Doug Weiss into my life, then we can't do ministry together. So she drew that dividing line. She's like, if you don't believe God sent Doug into my life, we can't do ministry together. So that's what led to the rift. And at that point, there was really no way to ever really reconcile, because she wouldn't come off that position. And obviously that led to Suzy getting fired. I hung on, for as long as I could, off television, continue to work in my role as an executive at Daystar. And then eventually they got to the point where they said, "We need you to sign an NDA or you will lose your position as vice president and position on the board." I said, knowing all that I know as far as all the spiritual abuse, and there's been no clear repentance or reconciliation from that. And plus knowing that there's still questions about what happened with my daughter, I said I could not sign the NDA, truly, of our daughter.
As my interview with Jonathan and Suzy continues, at the center of this controversy has been the essay of the child of Jonathan and Suzy, and it, to this point, has remained unresolved and has been one of the largest conflicts that has brought about the departure of peace from the Lamb family.
And Pete said, "Well, I like the city view too." And so he said, "I want to see your city view." So they went up the stairs.
The grandson and Pete, and Pete had the baby.
The grandson, Pete, and the baby. Okay. Now, all those details have been left out.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they went up the steps, and again, I was there. I heard this whole conversation. And around the same time, or maybe just a few minutes after, I don't know exactly when, but my granddaughter went up to the room and went over to her side while Pete and the baby and my grandson were looking out the window at the city view.
Okay.
And she proceeded to put her bathing suit on. Well, about the time she started to put it on, Jonathan comes running up the stairs.
Her dad.
And says, "What are you doing in here while she's changing? What are you doing?" And Pete was like, "Well, I'm sorry. I don't even know if he actually saw anything."
Because he had his back to her.
Because he was holding the baby and the 8-year-old was there. So he said, "I'm so sorry," and left.
So what were you saying, Jonathan, like just the difference, the discrepancy in sort of how your mom's making it sound?
Yeah, so she basically changed the story to where Israel went up with and Ari followed after. When Suzy clearly saw,
So Israel and Ari are sharing a room. He has his bunk and she has hers, and they know, they when the other one's changing, just look away. So Israel's on his little device. He's in his bunk, not paying attention. And that's when Ariel came and starts changing, and that's when followed her immediately. He goes and started following her. So Joni's story. None of those women at that table were a witness. She was not there. Joni and Marcus were down in the basement. So her and Rachel and Pete have concocted this fake story, and they're going to run with it. I was in the kitchen.
what happened in the kitchen when they followed up.
Yes.
I was in the bathroom of our room brushing my teeth when Suzy came to me and said, "Hey, just followed Ari up to go get her." Well, she was going to change into her swimsuit. So,
And
led me
that
to
wasn't
force run up
cool.
the stairs.
Yeah.
No. I mean, her alarm bells went off. I knew immediately in my spirit like something was off, and that I literally ran as fast as I could to get up there.
Yeah. One of the things that that people are saying, online is, was there a knowledge or an understanding that something was off about Pete before the actual lake house? Because from what I'm gathering, different things I'm reading, you had been warned by Rebecca and JW that they were uncomfortable. And in fact, Pete had not been able to go to their place.
Yeah, 100%. And just to clarify, it was actually a beach house, not a lake house.
I'd like to explain where the confusion came from, because the child was a non-factor and completely innocent. Israel was in his bunk. He has nothing to do with this story. But if you take it back to 2020, when it was where no one denied that the police did an investigation at the school, because at that point, someone at Daystar was not even a consideration. I would never go there. I did not want anyone to be guilty there. So I was constantly asking my daughter, my child, was it a boy? Was it at school? We kept texting the family, trying to figure out who it could be. She kept going along with everything I asked her. She's 5 years old. So at that point in 2020, even though there were suspicious things, I did not 100% didn't let my mind go there at all. I truly focused on the school. When the police shut the case on the school, I was actually very disappointed because it left me with no answers, and I wanted answers. So from there, things start building, and more than anything else, the truth is my child's behavior in front of this man. Every time he came around, her body would tighten up. She was terrified. She would hide. The only place she did not want to go was Daystar.
Yeah. And that's how we knew it wasn't the school, because after she told us about the abuse, she didn't have a problem going back to her school. She loved her school, but she did have a problem going to Daystar.
Yeah, the very day we met the teacher, she wanted to stay in school. So they're trying to concoct a new story with the process of what that looked like in that short period of time while the police were investigating the school. From there, certain instances started to build up, but I was too terrified to say anything to anyone. That's when Rebecca and JW came to me, and I was shocked that somebody else was also picking up on these things, but they witnessed, him kissing her neck, her body, and they told me this, and I thank God for it. And then Denise was helping the family with other problems, like the other dynamics of the family. It had nothing to do with our child. And in one session, because I didn't really have drama with anyone, so in my session is when I unexpectedly started open up to Denise about these things. And she started to put things together, and she said, well, this sounds like a guilty person. You got to be careful. Let's all pray, because we don't want to point. This is such a horrible accusation. We never want to point fingers at anyone. So God, make it clear. That's it. We didn't have any agenda to prove him guilty, nothing. In fact, we were hoping and praying it would not be him.
Because we knew the massive rift it would cause in the family if it was the family member. So we were obviously very careful to even consider that as an option or a possibility. It didn't even enter our minds, whenever our daughter first told Suzy about the abuse.
People are asking, is it now sort of it's reopened, and is there a further investigation, or where do y'all go from here?
Yeah, so we got our daughter into counseling to try to deal with the trauma of the abuse and to allow her to heal. And when we first went to this counselor, it was early 2020, for. And they, with all the details that we had given the counselor, they said we need to report this to CPS. So they made the report, they made the call to CPS. CPS contacted the city we live in, which is Colleyville, Texas, the police department, and that caused them to reopen our case. Because remember, the case was opened initially, we reported it the day after she told us back in 2020. And then they had closed it once they went to the school. They found out there were no adult males there working there. And our daughter, when they did a forensic interview on her, she didn't speak to them, so they shut down the case. But when we gave them all the new information related to Pete and all the different evidences and stories that kind of added up and pointed to Pete, they were very concerned. So they reopened the case. And they have said at this time that they need an outcry from her. And that's basically for her to name the perpetrator. Once she names the perpetrator, they said they can issue an arrest warrant that day. But as it is now, unfortunately, ever since she spoke to my mom, this was the day after she told us about the abuse. She went to my mom alone. Ever since then, she hasn't said a word about it and doesn't remember it.
Well, so I was with her through the counseling process. And with that, there are pictures, there's drawings. There's so many layers to this with a child.
Yeah.
And even before, Jonathan said we started counseling in early 2024. Well, before that, earlier, we were already talking to other counselors out of state, who friends recommended. And I'm thankful for this counselor too, because as we started counseling locally, our child started shutting down, started getting angry, even though we were getting some things. This older counselor told me, Miss Jennifer, she said, it's your child's well-being and health is more important than getting justice right now. And I God has created our body with a defense mechanism for it to come out when it comes out, when she feels safe. Please don't push your child to the edge. And we, after still trying, and seeing the physical effect on her body, we felt a peace from God that it will come out when it needs to come out. But we just have to speak the truth.
Yeah, and one more thing. So whenever a child endures trauma like this, from all the experts that we've spoken to, the brain as a defense mechanism will a lot of times lock it away into a part of the brain that can't be accessed until typically it will become unlocked when the child that's endured abuse, when they have their first sexual experience. So it may not be until they're like in their early 20s or whenever that might be. That's a lot of times when that memory is unlocked, and then those memories come flooding back from whenever the abuse happened, when they're a child, and then they can deal with it and go through counseling, because the way God made that as a defense mechanism, because it's just too heavy for a child to process that severe trauma. So we're not expecting necessarily to get justice against Pete. I mean, it may be many years from now, but there's not a statute of limitations for that. But again, the bigger concern is, there is a clear intent by my parents to keep the investigation into Pete from going forward and to have it shut down without him being cleared. And that to me is the biggest problem, that they didn't even want it to go through that process. They wanted just to, my mom said that she heard from God. She prayed and that Pete was innocent, and therefore case closed. We don't need to have Pete even see the forensic counselor or have any more, have him being looked into as a potential perpetrator.
And yet Denise Boggs was saying that Pete kept asking her if she would clear, and she kept stating to him, I can't clear you. And she can't. She doesn't have the designation. So it's surprising that Pete would repeatedly keep going to someone who can't do it and not go to the actual person who could clear him. And that remains to this day, that he just hasn't cleared himself.
Yeah, and that's what's so troubling, is that Pete was told he could go back to North Carolina. He could meet with Miss Debbie Linhart and answer all the questions, go through the full evaluation without his wife by his side. And then he could have gone through the process of getting cleared. However, he specifically said, he told Miss Denise, I'm not coming back.
Yeah,
So
not could, he should. They wanted him to.
they wanted to come back, but he said, I'm not going to come back. And then what's troubling is my dad sat me and my brother-in-law down in his office a few days after Pete had gone up to the counselor, and he basically said, Pete has been cleared by this forensic counselor. He is deemed innocent, and if you continue to believe that Pete is a you know what, then you need to get another job and you need to submit. And so at that time, we did our best to put it behind us. Again, I had the relationship with my parents that I almost saw them as that they could do no wrong. I had a very, very trusting relationship with them. And even though in my spirit, like I still felt a little unwell, I still, did my best to try to move forward, within the family, close-knit family system that we were in, all working together in a ministry. And we moved forward. And then my dad, he passed away less than 4 months after that.
Right. Very difficult. I just want to say what you guys have all been through and how this is just, playing out in the public. It's a hard thing, but there's such strength in you, and I just appreciate your hearts. One thing about that day, which was really neat, and Rebecca's quite quiet. She's not on social media that I can really see a lot. I can't, like her Facebook is, but this is a beautiful young lady that seems to, and I think there's a strained relationship now, but I just want to say that what I discern when I read her part and her role in it, that night, she, as you said, I think, Suzy, it was kind of shocking, like she wanted to be a part of the huddle in your mom and dad's bedroom to intercede, to discern. She wanted to be a part in there, and she just came in literally, in a prayerful, warrior-like way, is what I think you described. And she was very alarmed that night because they had already been warning you guys.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
That's okay.
I thank God with all my heart that I had her. She was bold as a lion, stood for truth, saw everything. She could speak at any point if she wanted, but we put when you break out of a control system, you learn to just give people their time, their process. If she never spoke, I would hold nothing against her. She was there for us, her and JW, when we needed them. So I know Rebecca fears God. Her and I have cried many, many, many days together, held each other close. And that's the Rebecca I'll always remember. So whatever she does, it's okay for me because, God will bring justice in due time, which we trust that. But it would be tremendous blessing if she would rise up and speak. It could put, because right now it looks like family drama. It looks like one side versus another, which God told me very clearly. He said, I never called you to defend yourself. I called you to tell the truth. And many people warned me when we were building up to this moment. They said, you're not dealing with normal people. Most people would see this as a scary truth and run and hide, but you're dealing with people who are the most vindictive. They will come after you and they will flat out lie and try to destroy you. So are you prepared? It's going to get worse before it ever gets better. And so we had to constantly encourage each other and strengthen each other in the Lord, saying, in due time, Psalm 37, God, he will make our righteousness shine like light and bring justice like the noonday. So we held on to these things, knowing God would rise up. Jehu's like, you came out of nowhere, Laura, and you have been such a truth teller. So I never want to go low to the point of family drama. This is, here our side, their side, none of that. Our job is to tell the truth before God, and it is his job to bring justice. So whether it's Rebecca speaking or not, I know it will come in God's timing.
I think one thing that was coming to me was this story of Esther. And in the kingdom, here was this precious woman, Esther. And Mordecai said to her, do not think that if you remain silent, that this will not also harm you and your life will be taken. And there's just, whenever I think of Rebecca, I think she's in quite a position right now, but she's also an Esther. And I see your tears, and I think that means you all love her. And
Yeah.
yeah, you were actually on the beach the next day, was it? Or was it that same day that this happened?
Right
You were-
after.
and what was
We
that
held
like
each
being
other.
on the beach?
We just held each other. We cried. JW was hugging Jonathan, and Rebecca is more of a warrior. she was like, I'm gonna confront Dad, and so we were in the room. It was Jonathan, me, Becca, and JW, and we didn't really talk to Marcus and Joni all day. It's like the process in this family had always been, if something bad happens, let's pretend it didn't and let's move on. For the sake of the ministry, for family unity.
Right.
Jonathan being the oldest, he carried 1,000-pound weight of like, what do I do to keep everything united?
Yeah.
Which thank God he set us free from now in a false sense. So that evening, Rebecca was like, come on, Suzy, we're going. And we go, and Marcus was really angry. I will say this, through all the years, Marcus has never raised his voice at me. He's never been angry. He's always been tender and gentle. Even if he scolded everyone else, he would turn, even that day, he scolded everyone. You get out, you get out. And then he'd look at me and, he'd be gentle.
Mm-hmm. So
I was used to that with Marcus. And that day, though, I saw a very different side. He had to protect all he worked his whole life to build. I saw a different man. And that's why I was thinking that, Rebecca, you're wasting your time. Things have never changed to this point. Why would it change now? And he said exactly that, I'll do what I have to do to protect what I have to. And Rebecca, she made some pretty strong statements to me after that, but of, how God brings justice and things rolled out how they did. But all that to say, yes, Rebecca has always been a sister to me. So, even if she were to speak up and say, oh, I have no part in this and I don't know anything, it would change no part of my love for her, because again, in the end, my justice comes from the Lord.
That is beautiful. I think that I'd like to ask about Rachel, but I have mentioned on a couple broadcasts about some. Obviously, the relationship between you and her has fallen because she's posting that you blocked her, and other people are commenting, "Well, you're putting stuff up about her daughter." That this has been very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. With Rachel, I had no favorites. Rebecca and I are very similar, very, very similar in personality. Joni and Rachel are very, very similar in personality. They're type A, very dominant, versus Becca and I are type B, very easy, go with the flow. Fun is the main priority in our lives. Laugh. Anyone at Daystar that works there could tell you this. So, that's why at different points we wanted to leave Daystar. It was too difficult. When we would do our strength finder tests, we had very similar answers. Everyone else was like strategy, competition, this and that. Me and Becca, empathy, woo, includer, positivity. So we didn't fit in. So in those terms, it was easier with Becca. But with Rachel, God is my witness. I put my whole heart to always pull her. Not that I'm better than her, but my last conversation with Rachel, my real conversation, was 4 hours long at Daystar. Left my kids at home with Jonathan. We sat for 4 hours, and I was constantly using scripture. And all the scriptures in the book of James talks about selfish ambition, jealousy. It leads to all evil. Daystar is not yours. It's not mine. It's God's. It's about the millions of people who need the gospel. So this is not about photo shoots. This is not. And I know I was hated for it. I was always seen as, oh, she's always beating the Bible on us. So there was that strain. And then again, when I've seen a pattern of when people are attacked by these, when people are attacked, it turns into a smear campaign. So I thank God for wise people who already prepared my heart, saying that, hey, when you tell the truth, be prepared for a few things. Number one, They will twist the story completely, because for them, it's not about what's right before God. For them, it is public opinion. Who wins? Everything is a competition. Who wins? So I had to prepare my heart for that. Most people will walk away silently. These wouldn't. And the next thing was that nothing is below the belt. They will use your children. They will destroy you. They can do anything. So you have to hold on to God being your defender. And so for these reasons, with me and Rachel, I had to block to, I've given years of speaking God's word, and I had to protect my heart from there.
Then 2 days later, November 18th, 2023, we get a call from Miss Denise Boggs. And in that call, she tells us, and now this is the first time we ever knew this fact. She tells us that Pete had never been cleared by Miss Debbie Leonard, the forensic counselor. And so this sent a complete shock into Suzy and me, because again, my father had sat me down back in August of 2021, and he said that Pete had been cleared and he was innocent by this forensic counselor. To find out my father had lied, and it was just a shock. And again, my father, like, I would never want to dishonor him. I think he was an incredible man of God. Obviously, he built an incredible network. God used him mightily. He saved many people. But the one weakness it seems like he had, he obviously had one moral failing, obviously, with my mother. But besides that, the one major weakness he had was that he wanted to protect the billion-dollar empire at the expense of my daughter. And again, I could see maybe how he could think that's the greater good. You know, you have this mega empire that's reaching billions of people. You don't want that to be tarnished with the thought that one of the family members could have essayed, his grandchild. But the fact that he didn't want to find out the truth, that he shut down the investigation, was obviously just completely shocking and troubling. And, I believe that, God, he's a righteous God.
Your family has grappled with a story of biblical proportions, is what I feel. A story of deception, deceit, cover up. And for you, Suzy, when you found out that Marcus had lied, that must have shaken your world too.
So, I was wanting to add some context to Jonathan's previous answer to your original question about if she hadn't made us read that card, if we would have ended up here. And you just hear me out, because I do think God, he's outside of time, and it all worked out perfectly. Because I know it sounds crazy to say perfectly, but so for context, for people who don't know, in that meeting with Jimmy Evans, the submit meeting, I didn't sound like myself, because I was at the end of myself. I was just ready for them to, throw me out, fire me, anything. Because we had many meetings prior to that where Jonathan and I made it very clear. We have this biblical conviction. Please don't mix that. Don't force that on us and our jobs.
Honor it. So just honor it.
Simple. Yeah. Which to her, that was a direct challenge. Mm-hmm. So there we have other recordings where, there was multiple threats made. I'm going to throw you all out. I'll run this place with Doug till Jesus comes. And, over the months, I was just like, she's wounded. She's saying things, which is the main reason we ended up with, people asking, why do we even have recordings? Pastors told us, if this stays about to get dangerous, plus it's much bigger than your story, just record. And I didn't have the spine to do it, but he did.
And like Suzy and I actually didn't have a thought to record that meeting.
Never.
And thankfully we did, obviously, because I don't think people could have believed how bad it was and the things that were said and how we were treated. But our pastor friend, who we were communicating very much with, told us to make sure and record this meeting. And so we followed their advice.
So we made our boundaries clear, and we knew this. But to me personally, on a personal note, I had put away the thought about my child, anything covered up. I put that away until that meeting with Joni and Jimmy Evans. Yeah. Because, Marcus died that night. She said something horrible to me. Yeah. And then I was not there the next night when he did die. We came after. But in that meeting with Jimmy Evans is the first time she brought it up. Suzy's done this before. She's had these. And at that point, something ignited, and Jonathan emailed her saying, "Mom, you brought up the most painful thing in our lives."
Yeah.
And
At that time, it wasn't an issue. We weren't
He
trying
brought it up.
to throw any like consternation into the family about that. We had moved past it as best as we
we were
could.
so loving.
Yeah.
So at that point, I felt in my spirit, okay, God, you brought this up for a reason, not just for pain. Something is going to happen.
Yeah.
As the months start building, this is hard for me to tell, but Joni was talking to multiple people in the ministry world. Sometimes Jonathan would send me pictures because he had access to the camera. Big names sitting in a corner for 45 minutes, and just slandering me, destroying me. And then she ambushed a friend of ours in a restaurant, and he told us, Joni said, Suzy is a Jezebel who is out to destroy Doug and Pete. At this point, I had never done anything after that, man. I wasn't talking about the story because it was not a non-factor at that point. So I started to think, God, what is going on?
Did she actually use the term Jezebel, Suzy? Like she was calling you a Jezebel?
Oh, yeah.
That was the word. Okay.
Oh, and this is the crazy part. In October, she came over to our house for my birthday, hugged me, kissed me, told me how much she loved me, even though she had fired me. We were just in a pattern of, I'll hug you and tell you I love you. And I thought maybe God is doing something in her heart. Mm-hmm. And then the next day is when our friend told us at the restaurant, she said this about me. And that's when God started teaching me about I love you, how it's used to control people, but it has no worth to it. I'll close on this with, at that point, I started to realize, okay, God, this is God bringing up some things. So there was a deep part of me that had been waiting to ever hear from Debbie because I wasn't allowed to talk to her when it was shut down. So I always deep in my spirit was like, someday maybe, or something else will happen. So when that call did come from Miss Denise in November, as much as I was hurt and shocked at the cover up, I had the peace that this is the Lord's battle. And and God is not letting this rest because he has a full set. And I still am in a place because we haven't seen the fullness of God's plan. This has all been brought to the surface. Yes, our focus is more on exposing the cover up and bringing accountability. But I do know that God will take this full circle whenever the time comes. And that's where,
What do you mean you weren't allowed to talk to a person that's investigating your own child's essay? Who told you you're not allowed?
Joni, just if you want to show me your submission and you have the right heart before God to do what's right, then you will let this go because that is surrendering it to God.
And my father, he told me again, if you believe Pete had done this, then you need to get another job. So that was his way of basically saying, don't talk about it, don't question it. Pete has been cleared. Let's move on and submit. So
we did try to call
her. That was the line that was drawn.
We did try to call her and didn't get an answer. And we just thought, okay, you know what? God will help us in the right time.
Right. Jonathan, you said something a few minutes ago, and I thought I made a mental note that I want to ask you about that. You grew up and you idolized your parents and you thought great of them. You have this family intact. You're doing this huge work for God. But you said you did know that if you went against them, there would be retribution. There would be, something like. So obviously they were a disciplinary kind of parents. Like you knew if you did wrong, you're going to get punished.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, and that I think is a great thing for as long as you're a child. But once you become an adult, the dynamic changes. You're not in that adult-child relationship. So I think that adult-child relationship, some of the aspects of that may have remained, into our young adulthood. And the lines would sometimes get blurred between mother, father, and son, and CEO, employee, and obviously just the dynamic of all of us all working together as a family. My mom and dad preached as like probably their greatest desire, their greatest thing that they asked for was family unity. But the problem is sometimes you can't have family unity if something is out of line. Like in this case, you can't necessarily align with someone if you believe someone in the family is someone who did something very harmful to your daughter. So it just became a very difficult to try to do our best to work within the family and move on, and as best as we could to put it behind us, and that's kind of what happened.
And then there was really two things. There was this difficult situation which happened before the passing of your father, and then there's the introduction of Doug. And you, Jonathan, you have really wrestled. Can I say wrestled, even trying to see how this is okay?
Yeah, that's right, Laura-Lynn. So in that meeting, Jimmy again was brought in. They had already made up their mind. Jimmy was going to move forward with marrying them. And in that meeting, they were going to do whatever they could to get us in line, if you will, to support the marriage. And ultimately, they wanted to have it to where I would walk my mother down the aisle to show that, public seal of approval. And again, in that meeting, it came up that wouldn't the most pleasing thing before the Lord be for Doug to reconcile with his ex-wife, Lisa? And unfortunately, that brought up just a very kind of unfortunate reaction by Doug.
Yeah, he got pretty heated. I noticed at that point, like he was, I don't know where he was in the room, but he was hard to hear. And then all of a sudden he is extremely angry and making all kinds of claims about abandonment, being abused. The interesting thing, though, from talking to Miss Denise, is that is not the story she got. And you made a point that I thought was good, Jonathan. You said, but Doug's the best of the best. This is a very smart, intelligent man who's like a psychologist, basically, sex therapist. You were saying, like, how do we know?
Yeah, I believe he would know exactly what to say and what to do, to accomplish his means, which I believe is capturing the ultimate prize, which is my mother. But yeah, my point was, wouldn't it be the best thing to get back with Lisa? And then I said, if you move forward with this marriage, Mom, how did we lose the ability to preach the uncompromised truth of the Word of God, that God is not for divorce? He wants people to reconcile and to get back and restore marriages. And it's so sad because of this whole relationship. My mother went on this campaign with different podcasters and different guests on the show. And now instead of talking about restoring marriages, it's almost like she's doing her best to justify divorce and to talk about how that's okay a lot of times. There's a clip of her, going on with Tim Ross and talking about that. So it's just sad that that's now the narrative that she's pushing. And, before, back when she was married to my father, she was probably one of the strongest people when it came to her conviction and believing and fighting for marriage and doing whatever it takes. And obviously my mother endured horrible affair by my father, I think for about a 7-year period. And she had every right to leave the marriage, in that case, biblically, because of the adultery. And she made the decision to fight for her marriage. And that was so honorable. And obviously God blessed her many times over for that decision. So it's just sad to see that that's where she was then, and to now. It's sad to see how she's changed her stance on that.
Was Doug Weiss part of helping your mom and dad go through that difficult part, to your knowledge? Was he someone they would speak to about the affair that had taken place?
Yes, actually a close pastor friend of mine who spoke out against the marriage told me that one of his biggest concerns was that after my mother and father were going through counseling after my dad had the affair, they went to Doug Weiss's counseling center for an intensive. And that's where you go through like every little detail of the situation. And basically, I was told that Doug put my dad through the proverbial ringer. So he knew like all the details about all the intimate parts of their marriage and what went wrong, etc. And so here's the man with that knowledge. Now fast forward to 2023, and he's now passionately pursuing my mother for a hand in marriage. And of course, that's against, all kinds of ethical best practices for counselors. It's highly looked down upon to ever pursue a relationship with a former client. And the other troubling thing was that Doug had been appearing on Daystar as a guest for well over a decade, probably multiple times a year. So he'd had well over 20 appearances on Daystar over the past decade. So he knew about Daystar, he knew about the platform, he knew what it had to offer, and he was on record stating that he had always wanted a television ministry. And so, ironically, he says the reason he actually started conversating with my mom was he called her to tell her that he is buying time on the ministry for his program, and he just wanted to let her know that he was divorced. He wanted to make sure that'd be okay for him to still have a show on Daystar. And my mom said that's when they started talking, and ever since then, their relationship blossomed. So, again, that's just troubling that he knew about Daystar and what it had to offer, and it's like he got the prize he was looking for.
And that is what your mom told me as well. There's some confusion as to, okay, so they were so close that Lisa and Doug, I guess, were at your father's funeral. And Doug would
Not Lisa.
Just Doug.
Oh, so I'm
Just
sorry.
Doug.
Oh, just Doug. Lisa was not there.
And Doug, ironically, whenever he got to the funeral, he's on record saying to our staff, he said, "I was the first person there when they opened up the casket because I wanted to make sure he was still there."
Yeah.
Which I don't know why you would say something like that, but
A very strange remark indeed. But Lisa wasn't there. Do you think that is that odd to you, that as friends of the family that Lisa wouldn't be there?
I guess that is a little surprising. But I guess if he's saying that he was considering divorce at that time, maybe he, they decided to not go together.
Yeah, perhaps. So, Suzy, you've really struggled with this as well because you believe in marriage profoundly. In fact, I love when you have said that, like, God told you that Jonathan was your man, right? Like, you knew. And good for you, because what a catch. Good for you.
I know.
He is standing like a true man of integrity. And actually, you guys are losing so much. And you're both like, you know what? We just have to live the truth. I honor that with you guys so much. This is huge, because if you really wanted to keep the ring, the family ring, you would submit and just be silent, and you haven't been able to do it. And the whole world's watching you, and you guys are awesome. Suzy.
Thank you. And
yeah,
I was just going to say, to speak to that, because I think sometimes people see the narrative that my mom put out was that as soon as my father died, I was immediately protesting that I demanded to be the president, and I was disgruntled by that. And then she said that after Doug came, it got worse. But that could not be farther from the truth. Whenever my father died, I did everything possible to love and support my mom. And she had so much trust in me that she literally said, "I trust you with my life." Yeah. And she added me to every single one of her bank accounts and credit cards. So that was the level of trust that she had for me. There was never a question of me trying to demand the presidency right after my father passed.
In fact, she told you to take your father's office, the president's seat.
And I just said, I'll wait for that time.
That's real.
Exactly. So it wasn't until Doug and her were about to get married when the real rift happened. And at that point, when she realized that she could not strong arm me into bowing down to, the marriage. And that's when she realized that she started taking the steps to distance me from Daystar and my position, and obviously that led to my removal from the board. And then
And Doug got your
ultimately,
office too, or is that true? Am I getting that right?
I'm not sure. I was still in my office up until the time I was terminated.
She wanted to give it to him. That's
But
right.
she said, I would like to give Doug your office, and then you could have my father's office.
He said no.
But yeah.
You describe your relationship with your mom as warm. Like, I think that's been the greatest shock. And I just want to let you all know that I didn't decide to leave Daystar when you guys put your video out. I was shocked. I'm like, who's following them? Private eyes? They don't feel safe. Like, I was just appalled. Like, what is going on? But I decided to leave Daystar when a mother got on worldwide internet to declare her son as doing a smear campaign against her. That's when I left, because I couldn't, like, it broke my heart. It brought tears to my eyes. And one of the things I said to your mom is, your son is a wonderful kid. Like, the way you talk, you are not, I know rebellious kids, okay? You are not that. You are not that. And that broke my heart. But before Doug, or when? Like, when did this change? Because you and her, you were the apple of her eye. You were her firstborn son.
Yeah, I mean, I think my parents always said that I was the kid that gave them no trouble. I was never rebellious. I was kind of like a goody two-shoes in a way. Like, I'm not bragging myself, but I just wasn't the type that ever got in trouble. I always trusted my parents. I had the fear of the Lord. I did not want to be outside of His will. I stayed on the narrow path. I never did anything to veer outside that path. And again, it only happened up until, Miss Denise, she's the one, we found out that, she had spoke to, Lisa and Doug, and she knew the true story. And when she put her foot down to my mom to say, hey, this is not right. You should not move forward with this relationship. And then she wrote that beautiful letter, which you can see on Julie Royce's article. There's a link to the letter that Miss Denise wrote. She wrote that beautiful letter, and that's when we knew, like, all right, this is not going to be easy. I know that we're probably going to be in a big battle to stand up for the truth and what's right, but we need to have that hard conversation with my mother. And I gathered me, Suzy, Rachel, Josh, Rebecca, Jonathan, Weiss, all 6 of us in her office, and we just wanted we were all in one accord at that time that this marriage was not right, and encouraged her to reevaluate, or at least slow things down. And she gave us all no more than 60 seconds each, pointed at each of us after we were done, and said, fear, 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 fear. That's all I hear is fear.
You want my power.
And then she proceeded to rush out the door and flew off to New York with Doug. And so there was never really any type of a listening ear. She mentioned to her ladies on the Table Talk panel that she was open for correction and everything like that. But yes, she was open to correction from, people who would never say anything against her. But when it came to her family members, who were all against this marriage, and obviously Miss Denise, who is against it, she turned a blind eye. And then she found Jimmy Evans to be another yes person who could be the spiritual oversight and authority to move this forward.
Can I add a quick thing? When Jonathan, first, actually, there was a previous meeting with just Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca, just her children.
Yeah.
And she was telling me at this point, her and I were so close. And she was like, Suzy, I'm scared. Pray for me. I want you in that room. Because I had always defended her no matter what. And we had that small break in, after it happened at the beach house in 2021. But as soon as Marcus died, I was ready to get right back where I was. And so after that, I went over to her house that night. She's a widow, she's alone. All I ever wanted to do was protect her and love her. I go alone. And Jonathan was used to me and Joni having that relationship. I would take ice cream for her every night. We'd sit. actually a little even farther back, before right after Marcus died, I had many nights alone with her. We'd eat ice cream, and I would, tell her how much I wanted her to be in love, and I genuinely didn't want her to be alone. Everyone deserves, a wonderful man like this. But anyway, so that night it was totally different. She was angry, very angry, and that's when the threats began. I'll throw you all out. And so I say that to say, one little other thing, I at one point I was so wanting her, before I realized the marriage dynamics of Doug and his wife, I was so in it for her. I went to the mall to buy her a present for her birthday or something, and I found a letter D ring, and that's how much I wanted her to be in love. So the whole thing about power and this and that, it's so low and pathetic and sad, but it has been the fear that's been deep seated in her for so long. So here we are.
So you struggled with a few things. You were very closely, because of your closeness with Joni, your love for her, your deep hope that she would find love. Everybody wanted that for her. The entire country was devastated. Marcus dies, and she's so strong. I mean, she got back on air right away. And
Same day.
the same day, that was very extraordinary. Everyone watched that. And, just, I guess, like 5 or 6 hours before, she had been in the room in the middle of the night. And I believe she was there with Josh. It's my understanding, she said online that her and Josh were the ones that were in the room when Marcus died.
Correct.
So she gets online, and she's able to be so strong. Everybody wants healing for Joni. Your heart must have just been breaking. You just lost your dad, Jonathan, and you want your mom to be cared for, and you do everything that you can. But in comes Doug, and I think, from my understanding, Joni has basically said that she was kind of digging the phone calls by about June. She was enjoying that Doug was reaching out to her by June. I'm not saying there was a relationship, but her words in the tape recording that I heard, she really liked that. She liked that. But there was still a process playing out, and you guys were watching up close, and Denise knows that she spoke with Lisa in August. So it was August when, by Denise's own words, there was still hope for the marriage. Mm-hmm. And so, but things begin happening. And Suzy, you had your alarm bells up because you were concerned for her.
Absolutely. The moment for me when I truly realized that this is not the God I serve, is not here, is the day that Joni came over. It was Jonathan, me, and JW who were about to watch the Cowboys game, and Joni was angry and said, Doug is in Colorado, and his ex-wife, had been begging him all day to reconcile and to choose her, and then Joni was like, it makes me want him more. Shows me what a great husband he'll be. Yeah. And I remember sitting there like, I really cried out to God, because this life is like a vapor. It doesn't matter who you love, who you're loyal to. God is above all, and I don't know Lisa. I have no reason to risk it all for what she's asking, but I know my God. I know his heart. Mm-hmm. I put myself in other people's shoes. If this was me and I was married to Jonathan, 30-something years, raised our children, and he finds someone else, and I'm begging him, please stay. And if other women would just be like, oh no, this is God's miracle for you, they're not serving my God. I thought all women would rally around a faithful wife of 30-something years. So it was a very, very painful, breaking process. Yeah.
And in fact, Denise Boggs, she's the one, you mentioned that letter, and I actually do have it here. I'll see if I can pull it up. But she used strong terms like wolf in sheep's clothing. This is not a light matter for someone who loves your family to
Right.
begin to kind of say, if, like Denise says, if you give in to seductive flattery, you are being seduced and deceived. In spiritual warfare, you know the enemy by what the demonic spirit produces. A spirit of deception produces deception in the person who is under attack. A spirit of deception operates through flattery. At first, gain access. A man will use flattery to find the weak area in the soul of a woman. Once a woman is under the deception of flattery, she can be manipulated. And she quoted Galatians 5:1, do not have fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. When darkness is operating, we have two options: to either laugh at it and fellowship with it or confront it. This is why flattery precedes deception. And, her concern she says, I voiced my concerns to Joni and Doug. Now, I don't know if the first time that Jimmy Evans would see something like this would be because Julie Royce is now reporting on it, because there was no in-depth as to all of the things, but she did not have kind words to say about Doug, and I think that's maybe why Doug, has basically gone off Miss Daisy. Miss Denise,
Yeah.
sorry. I called her Miss Daisy in my interview too. You had to edit it out. We're good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And, Laura-Lynn, that letter means so much, because if you have to realize the position that Miss Denise had in our family. So she was the counselor that my parents handpicked to be the one to lead as our family counselor. She had very close relationships with all of us, my mom and dad, me and Suzy, Rachel, Josh, Rebecca, and Jonathan Weiss. And each of us would call her if there's ever a conflict or a dispute. And she spent countless hours on the phone trying to work through different conflicts and providing good, godly wisdom and prayer. And she did this as a ministry.
Yeah.
So much so that she wasn't even compensated for the hours of phone calls that she took with our family. She was only compensated if she made an appearance on television on Daystar, but she spent hundreds and hundreds of hours with us family on the phone and was never compensated. She truly felt like she was doing it unto the Lord and to sow into the ministry. And because she had that high position, she was there on the phone, on speakerphone, almost every single day when my dad was in the hospital for 17 days. We would call in, she would cover us with prayer. She would speak encouragement and life into my dad. When my dad was getting down and discouraged, she would pray this incredibly powerful prayer and just change the atmosphere. And even on the actual day my dad died, November 30th, we were all huddled up as a family in prayer, tears streaming down our eyes. And she was just saying a final plea to the Lord, if you could revive Marcus, Lord, we would love for you do your healing touch right now, Lord, to revive him. And so she was there to the very bitter end of my dad's life as a close friend and confidant and spiritual warrior.
He actually gave her a list of things he asked of her. I don't know if you want to ask her about that, but he did.
Yeah, actually.
I would say let her tell it.
I would say it would be great if you could get Miss Denise on again, because my dad had some important instructions to give to her as like his last will and testament, and she would be able to deliver that. But
if she wants,
wow,
if she wants,
we certainly would love to have Miss Denise speak on that. When you were struggling with it, Jonathan, you were putting to Jimmy Evans very clearly and repeatedly something very profound, just saying, isn't it, wouldn't it be important to meet with Lisa Weiss? You really felt that was important because Miss Denise, she said, my perspective of Doug came after spending several days with him. And she, after spending 3 days, she says in the next thing, and this is all in the Julie Royce report, But my perspective of Doug came after spending several days with him. I voiced to her that the issues in the first marriage needed to be confronted before going into this marriage. Your mom agreed that they would hear me out at first. But once Jimmy Evans, when Jimmy Evans fully approved of Doug, she told me that they would not be interested in talking with me. This is the role of Jimmy Evans, and this is the difficulty now presented, because Joni decided that the yes person, the person that was willing to just give full credence to this, and by Miss Denise's own words, after meeting with Doug for 3 days, after meeting with Lisa for the same amount of time, I believe, she determined there was hope, and in fact told your mother that there's hope, because Doug had said he loved his wife and asked her, asked if, you know, if Miss Denise could talk to Lisa. By all accounts, what you guys were discerning without even knowing facts, I'm sure, because I'm sure Miss Denise wasn't sharing this, has only come to light afterward, but you were discerning something's a bit amiss when we haven't actually done due diligence to interview Lisa. And Lisa, of course, is quiet, and I think she probably, in the end, she knew that Doug was leaving, and she is not talking now.
Yeah. Laura-Lynn, I provided you with a recording of the meeting that we had with Doug and Jimmy Evans and my mom and Susie, and I asked that question, Jimmy, wouldn't it be the best thing? We'll ask them point blank, is like, well, you only got one side of the story, Jimmy. So how can you in good conscience move forward with this marriage knowing it's going to break apart two families, and you are doing something in which all of us, all the members of the family, all of the siblings and their spouses are speaking out against this marriage? Wouldn't it be the best thing to get both sides of the story? And he simply said, no, that would just slow everything down. And I've got everything I needed from Doug and talking to him to make an accurate assessment. So to me, that just shows that he was never trying to do the correct thing biblically, the God honoring thing, which is to get both sides of the story and at first try to reconcile the previous marriage if possible. But he simply wanted to move to get my mom and Doug married as quickly as possible.
And Suzy,
add one thing.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
We were told just yesterday that, Joni's still making her calls. We haven't talked to haven't called programmers and this and that, where we have no agenda. We're just like, obey God, see what he does. But, obviously all these programmers have been contacted and they hear Joni's story of rebellion and this and that, and that's okay. God has to deal with that. But we were told by somebody yesterday, Joni called them, and notice this thing that always happens with them. They'll always take a story and it's never consistent. It'll always change and evolve over time. So with us, it's like, oh, now it's a whole new different story just because Julie did mention a baby to protect that baby's identity. We thought they'd be happy about that. But now with Lisa, now she's telling people, well, actually, Lisa just wanted the money. So Doug, this is what we were told. We were told that Doug gave her an NDA and $2 million. That's the information we were given. I have no proof of that at all. But he did that to, be a generous, good husband. And now it's been turned on her that she didn't want Doug. She just wanted the money. So I just want you to see how these things keep happening. Always attack the victim and blame them. Oh, you wanted money. You wanted power. A counselor taught me this, that always watch a narcissist. Their accusations are their confessions. But most people are not aware of these things. Most normal, innocent people just live their daily lives. And so they don't understand the manipulation tactics. And that's why I believe one part of our story is God teaching the body of Christ, the sheep, to not be so innocent, but to learn these tactics of the enemy.
Yes, and when we look at the whole timeline, it does, Julie Royce has released the receipts for the honeymoon, and your father, if we could just give everyone a timeline, because it gets a bit complex, but your father died November 30th, 2021.
Correct.
By June of 2022, your mom says that she, was enjoying, hearing from Doug, and she also shared that with me when I was on set. That she began to realize she just enjoyed the talks, the calls. It wasn't a dating thing, but it was warm, and they were talking, and she enjoyed that. But by July, Doug is asking Miss Denise to please, in July, he's saying, I love my wife, and, would you speak with her? Asking Miss Denise, would you speak with my wife? And I think, I do think there's hope. By August, Lisa has come in to Miss Denise, and they've had their 3 days, as stated in this letter here. And then, by what we see on the receipts for purchasing the down payment of the honeymoon, that's by October, I believe. The first one, the first receipt, the down payment for the honeymoon is October. So things have progressed. So we got, July, August, September, we're engaged, or we're thinking about getting married by October, but we don't announce our engagement until December 31st or New Year's,
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Miss Laura, that was actually something that I didn't even calculate until I don't know if it was you or somebody else, until yesterday, that my mom put the down payment for the honeymoon 2 months before she was even engaged. So, I mean, that just shows you how quickly she was working towards this marriage, that she had already decided to plan her honeymoon before the engagement. And so they get engaged December 31st of 2022. And again, there's just a lot of secrecy and deception around the relationship that most normal people, when they get engaged, they want to shout it to the rooftops. But because my mother was marrying Doug, and he was coming off a divorce, she kept it quiet. She waited. It wasn't until March of 2023 that she publicly announced her engagement to Doug. So you have all of January, all of February, and half of March, where the world doesn't know, but she's engaged to Doug. And then she needed that time to kind of get everything aligned. She got with Jimmy, and they came up with this idea to have Jimmy Evans come on her table talk show and do the announcement. But before they announced that Doug was her fiance, Jimmy did the infamous, it's okay to get divorced because of the 4 A's: addiction, adultery, abuse, and abandonment, and did that whole, justification of the marriage. And then they introduced Doug at the end of the show.
And they took that show down.
Oh, we know why.
They took the show down because
Lisa spoke up for herself.
Lisa, she was made to be
The bad guy.
represented in a very bad light, unfairly to her. And she asked that they take it down, so they did. So that program is not even on Daystar's website anymore.
Suzy, but didn't you say that there was Joni was very upset in February after coming back from Australia? So Doug and Joni and I think your sister and brother-in-law had gone to Australia in about February, was it?
Yes.
And she was upset that the wife was begging to come back in February. So they were engaged, but not announced yet.
Not announced. And, obviously Doug and Lisa work together. They're doing life closely in that sense. So I could see how Lisa, still feeling hope and still trying. And I really felt bad for Joni, because I felt like it was a manipulation tactic on Doug's part, see how much I'm wanted. Because even in the beginning, by June, the things he was texting her, I could see right through it. I don't want to judge it, but it was like, women say this to me at the gym, and God told me not to hunt. He has the woman for me, and it made Joni's heart flutter. And he would send her these long voice messages every morning, a prayer, "Your daddy's girl," and I wanted to just be happy for her, but I could see right through it. So,
and you're saying June? Are you certain about that time frame? June?
June is when she told me about him. because we were on that vacation. And that's when she opened up to me about that. And it was a secret. No one knew. None of the kids knew till, was it August, September? That's when the others found out. But me and Jonathan alone knew. And even when we went to New York together, so the reason that New York trip happened is because Jonathan and I had celebrated 10 years of marriage the year prior. The thing that Rachel's using as a receipt, me talking about a villa, this, that, we had saved up years and years for our 10-year anniversary, and I was excited to celebrate that. Anyway, but because Marcus died and everything that happened on that August vacation in 2021, we didn't have our 10-year anniversary trip. So
you celebrate our 11th anniversary.
So in 2022, we had the big thing in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Joni was obviously not supposed to be part of that, but it was going to be her and Marcus's 36th
Right.
Anniversary. And my heart broke. I mean, if this is my own mother, you know, I would never leave her alone.
No, it would have been their 40th.
40th, wow.
I think, yeah.
And so I said, you know, come to New York with us. You know, she's my girl and I'm her girl. And I said, we'll watch Aladdin on Broadway. Jonathan and I really wanted to watch that. And then she was happy. And then she said, what if I brought Doug along? Because I want y'all to, you know, chaperone and tell me your genuine thoughts.
Yeah.
And I was elated to do so. I was like, of course, you know, because she didn't want to keep it a secret from the girls and they were coming to her house to swim and stuff. So this was a perfect place for her to just be alone and get to know this man. But things quickly changed. You know, we started to feel uncomfortable. There was nothing genuine. It was weird. But again, these are two grown adults. We're not supposed to. So we did our own thing on the trip. So it wasn't some big approval or anything. They're two adults who did their thing and we did our thing. Still, you know, we continued talking. She would share messages, texts, and all these things.
And that was
I shared.
the timeline for that. It gets confusing, but was that January basically 2022?
No, the August.
We went in August of 2022.
August of 2022. Got it. Okay.
When she got to meet him in person for the first time.
Okay.
And, you know,
So they were exclusively texting and talking on the phone every day
Right.
June
until that point.
Yeah.
And then
So,
having a relationship, then they were kind of finally going, okay, we're kind of acknowledging this. And this is in August when he's telling Miss Denise asking Miss Denise if she would meet with his wife.
I think that was July.
Oh, yes, July. That's right. So by August, though. Okay. Thank you.
And, you know, I have to say, in Joni's defense, when she sent him over to Denise, I truly believe that if there was any hope for that marriage, Joni, because she told me, we were at the lake house 4th of July weekend, and she said, Suzy, I'm just going to let it go if he's supposed to be with his wife, you know. And I loved that. I said, okay.
Yeah.
And so she did have that. But I remember telling her, we were driving back to the city, and I said, Joni, if he knows he can be with you, I really don't think he's going back to that wife. I just had a feeling.
Yeah.
And, you know, I kind of made her happy. And so I think he was saying things to Denise to give the correct answers, but I think this man had a plan. He was playing both sides because I saw in real time the text he was sending her. So Joni hates to be called weak or taken advantage of, but I saw what was going on. And so we were on an okay path until October, after that, the night I mentioned.
Well, actually, before that, I think you should mention, so she gets back from New York. You know, Doug buys her the Tiffany necklace in front of the Empire State Building. He said God told him to do that. And they have a great time. They start their relationship from more of a physical manner. And they get back. My mother has that moment where she's by herself in the pool and she asks God to give me a sign that this is from God. And she asked Suzy, you know, hey, I know you're prophetic. I know you're from God.
Yeah, if you could just pray for a dream, because I want to do the right thing. So I prayed.
You had a dream that night.
Saw the dream that night of the python, but she made a choice.
Tell me that dream, Suzy. Tell me that dream.
Okay.
What dream? You're asking God for a sign, send a dream, and you have a dream. What is the dream?
That night, I see a dream. I see Jonathan and me, and a guy who works at Daystar, someone on our team.
And this guy is someone at Daystar who's one of the most pure-hearted individuals at Daystar.
He only wants to talk about the Lord.
Yeah.
Anyway, I see a massive, and I had never seen a dream of a python in my life before. some massive python wrapping and squeezing the life out of Jonathan, me, and this employee, and Joni standing by and watching. And I remember waking up like, of course, I run to Joni and I tell her about it, and I can just see her face changes, and she's like, "Well, it means we need to stick together." And I was like, "This is obviously, but it's fine." But then, not long after, this security guard who's come to our house.
The next morning, so the security guard, who's now infamous for being the one that placed a tracker in my car, and the one that also delivered my termination letter to our front door, showing up in a bulletproof vest with his gun. This same security guy told my mom about a dream
he saw
that he had, and you could probably edit in the clip of her talking about it. I can send you the link.
He heard a laugh.
But he basically said he heard a laugh.
Yeah.
And my mom's like, "Oh, who was it?" And then the security guy says, "It was Dr. Doug Weiss." And then she was like, "Oh my goodness, it's a sign from God, that I'm."
So she made a choice.
Yeah.
And again, but so to build up to that night, and I think it was October, after Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca had confronted her.
Yeah.
That night when I was with her, I remember, it's so important to listen to what your gut is saying and what the spirit is saying. And I sat with her, and after she made all her threats, and she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that." And I was like, "Oh, it's okay." But I remember I looked her directly in her eye and I said, "Joni, are you willing to, your own children are saying at this point that you've destroyed this man's marriage.
Yeah.
Are you willing to give up 40 years of faithfulness to God and your testimony?
Yeah.
Everything for this one man?" She looked me dead in the eyes and she said, "Yes." And I really felt, in my spirit, like you wash your hands off. God gives free will. You step back. And so at that point, I started pulling away. I was still invited to her wedding meetings. I just kept saying no, pulling away. She wanted to have coffee. I didn't. And that's when the distancing started happening, until the meeting with Jimmy Evans, where we confronted. She was doing a lot of secretive things, wanting to, Jonathan's vice president on the board, and she's planning a secret income for Doug and doing a lot of, and you can hear it on that. I don't remember it all, but it's on that recording.
Yeah.
Right. And Jonathan, like with the one of the things that you've been really trying to guard Daystar was to have financial integrity. I've seen that now and heard you in recordings basically saying, well, I didn't agree with paying so much money for this. I didn't agree with paying for Joni and Doug's honeymoon, and whoever you were speaking to, I don't know if you can tell us that, but they didn't deny that Daystar had indeed paid for that. And this is a big deal in the last day or so about who paid for the honeymoon. And now Joni went on, with her friends and has stated, absolutely not. We paid for it 100%.
By the way, there are questions about, it's all over the internet, that Daystar paid $100,000 for my
Yes, I
honeymoon.
was getting ready to ask you about that.
So, absolutely not. Not one penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon. We paid for our honeymoon, okay? So, again, that's another lie that's out there.
Right.
Who paid for Daystar TV President Joni Lamb's $100,000 honeymoon? In a video this week, Joni said she did.
Not one penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon. We paid for our honeymoon.
But expense reports obtained by the Roy's report indicate otherwise. They show 2 charges for a resort in Los Cabos, Mexico on Joni's company card, one for nearly $37,000 and another for $60,000. And according to former Daystar Vice President Jonathan Lamb, when he objected to Daystar paying for the honeymoon, board member Tom Callender decided Daystar would gift Joni the entire $100,000. Now, more than a year later, when news about the honeymoon is becoming public, Joni Lamb insists that she reimbursed Daystar for the entire amount. But when the Roy's report reached out to Daystar asking for documentation of that reimbursement, the ministry produced none. For more information, see the article linked in the comments or our bio.
So they could have reimbursed, and the Royce report is hunting that down. Do you have any understanding of that situation?
Yeah, so I voiced my concern at the August 2023 board meeting. I just said, this isn't right. Daystar should not be paying for my mother's $100,000 honeymoon. And it was on the time at the time the board was me, my mother, and a gentleman named Tom Callender. And Tom Callender spoke up and he said, "Well, we're going to have Daystar gift Joni this honeymoon." So he just kind of made that declaration, and so that was it. He made that declaration, and I guess they went through the process of gifting it to her. However, since now it has been made public, because I at the time approved all the expenses that came through Daystar, so that's how I had the actual expense report that actually showed the dates that the honeymoon was purchased. That one in October of 2022, and then the second part was in May of 2023. Since I had that, I was able to provide that, to Julie Roy's, and it clearly showed that my mother's intention was to have Daystar pay for it using the credit card points.
Plus, we asked her about it multiple times.
Right,
And
but
she always mocked
I
us.
met with our CFO, Arnold Torres, and our head of accounting, Eddie Liasanto. And Eddie told us that Daystar did not have the credit card points sufficient to be able to cover the expense. So again, it would have had to have been Daystar paying for it.
Do you want to talk about the ambush meeting where in the recording?
Yeah, and so in that recording, that clip that's on Julie's article, that's where they had called me into another ambush meeting. Arnold, the CFO, he called me into the meeting, and when I got there, Daystar's general counsel attorney, John Lynch, was there, and the other board member, Tom Callender, was on speakerphone. And that's during the time when they were trying to work out a return for me and Suzy to television, and they were trying to again talk about like how we can do that, and they delivered the list of 13 stipulations for Suzy and me to return to television. But in that meeting, throughout that, one of the things I said was, I've always submitted to my mother. I just will not compromise when it comes to the Word of God. That I cannot publicly affirm the marriage, and that's where I drew the line. And I said I submitted to the fact that Daystar paid for her honeymoon, Rachel Brown's $5,500 worth of photo shoots that were covered, and the fact that Doug was made co-host. I didn't agree with that, but I submitted to that. I just I can't compromise on the Word of God. That's what that clip was.
Could I add an important part of this puzzle? So what's interesting is in that meeting, they accused Jonathan and me of extortion. They said your case is no different from the ladies that tried to sue Daystar. It was kind of crazy because all we asked was our convictions on our biblical convictions. That's it. So at that point, when he came home, we were shell-shocked they ever used that word. And God is so wonderful. On that trip when Jonathan and Joni went in August of 22, on the plane next to me was sitting a gentleman, and he talked to me as we were landing. It was a really turbulent flight, and he was kind, and I felt like a father in his presence. And his name is Gene, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm an attorney. I help churches if you ever need me."
And he said he recognized you.
He recognized me. That's why he introduced himself.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so in the middle of this turmoil, then they threw the word extortion. We have no legal experience, nothing. We, felt like kids. So I remember Gene. We contacted him. He called us right away, and Gene started to give us counsel because Jonathan kept fighting with Joni for family meetings. Yeah. He wanted to make it work. People were writing in, viewers, one email that really hurt me was an old lady on her deathbed. Her daughter was writing in saying she wants to know where Jonathan and Suzy went. And I didn't know we were loved.
Because we were like family to these viewers, like people that had seen us for years on television together, and all of a sudden you're just gone.
Well, see, I didn't understand all of this, but it broke my heart. I wanted them to have the truth.
Right.
So we started getting some legal counsel from Gene. Incredible. But he started to really be like a mentor to us and explain to Jonathan, the game is rigged against you. Stop fighting for these family meetings. They're all going to destroy Suzy. And I had been begging God, you have to bring repentance. I'm not going to go back. All that to say that the email that Joni used, that little part to make it look like extortion or whatever it was. So the legal counsel.
She called it blackmail.
Yeah. The legal counsel told Jonathan, so the only reason that the green room was taken away from us and Jonathan,
Us being on television together.
they started threatening that Marcus's future wishes, we have that email, Marcus's future wishes of Jonathan after Joni would be taken away as punishment for not supporting our marriage. So the legal team wrote that email saying that just right the wrongs. If you want peace, the punishments that were put in place, just remove those punishments. And the recordings, which is these meetings with Jimmy Evans and them verbally abusing us, we won't bring it to light because we never wanted to. We didn't ever want to
Right.
destroy and expose anybody. Our heart was repentance. So that explains that part. All he asked was that in the future they wouldn't attack his father's wishes. That's
Yeah,
it.
because I never was holding the recordings over their head as
No.
blackmail. They simply, they knew I had recorded the meetings at that point. So since they knew they were out there, and my mother's 13 stipulations to return to television, they asked that we destroy the recordings. And we just said, knowing that we could potentially get to a position like we are today where we might need them to be able to tell our story, I said they would never see the light of day. We just ask that you honor my father's wishes. And they basically took that small little paragraph at the end and made it look like I was blackmailing to be able to put everything behind. And now they've twisted the narrative to say that I'm even put behind my daughter's SA cover up for a future position. But again, at that time when I wrote that email, I had no idea about the cover up and that my father had lied to me. If I had known that, there wouldn't really be a way to really reconcile probably at that point.
But you felt something in your spirit because in that board meeting, 2 days before we found out the truth, because Joni had been calling me a Jezebel, Jonathan wrote and read out a very passionate letter to the board and to their lawyer, still begging for, can you give us some kind of justice or closure with our child? He read that, and Julie Royce will be releasing that soon, but he read it out.
Yeah.
And and look at God, how beautifully, days later we find out the truth.
God is a God of justice, and it does seem to be playing out. My question, Jonathan and Suzy, this is so painful. Like for us who are not even in your family, you seem to be operating under a peace that passes understanding. You're okay. Could I just ask, I've heard, like, are you getting any money? Like, how are you living? Everyone needs to live. And my understanding is your income has been cut, Jonathan, and Suzy, you were fired because you were not submissive. Like, people are concerned, and I would have thought that maybe this being in this family, it's my understanding you have your own mortgage. You do not have a home paid for by Daystar. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And but the I don't, and I won't say I understand that that's not necessarily the case for others, but there's been a lot of investment in, it came out in, a piece that I put out yesterday. It's kind of public knowledge in some ways that there's been a lot of money in the ministry and a lot has taken care of, the family here and there. But I just want to say once again that I just so admire that you guys have not taken an easy road. You have not had a home paid for by Daystar. You've done your own road. Why?
Yeah. And see, that was part, I think, of the plan, to try to get us to submit and to succumb and just to basically forego our convictions. If we sign the NDA, we could work back towards getting the full restoration of our income and being back on television. However, again, that was just a non-starter. And yes, we went from 2 nice salaries, Suzy and me, to Suzy 0 and me much less. So it was altogether about a 70% reduction in our income from
the beginning of the year,
from its peak
at the beginning of this year. But now we're obviously at 0.
And then obviously I officially terminated November 16th, just a few weeks ago. So
do you want to clear up some of the misconceptions? A lot of, like, I think you were asking, coming from a wealthy family, this and that, when your dad died.
Yeah. So unfortunately, even though my father, he was very diligent and had a nice net worth. My mother could not find, either she couldn't find the latest will, but she said the latest will that she had was only from 2005. And so at that time, me and my two sisters would have been teenagers or early 20s. I would have been 20, and then my sisters would have been teenagers. So in that will, I guess it read to where my mother would receive basically my dad's entire estate to my mother. So we didn't get a dime after my father passed. Typically common law is when one of the spouses passes, it's split between the surviving spouse, and then the other half is split between the surviving kids. So I didn't get a dime, unfortunately.
Yeah. So from there,
Yeah.
just to explain our situation. So no complaints with that. It's totally okay.
Right.
That's fine. So we have our normal income as a family.
Right.
So obviously mine is cut. I'm jumping in because I know, my friend sent you that voice message I had sent her that day that Joni showed up at our door. Obviously, I was in a very broken place. I'm much better now, but the frustration for me was the day I was fired, I told Jonathan, we'll sell this house, we'll move somewhere else. I've never held on to these things. And I'd prayed for many years to be able to be radical.
Yeah, Susie's ready to give it all up because again, like,
don't need the car.
this is our conviction.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's fine. The problem was Jonathan kept having faith that God is going to step in.
Yeah, God's going to do a miracle.
And the truth is, a friend paid our mortgage for 3 months. We never asked.
Out of the blue.
When Joni had given Jonathan Marcus's car earlier, maybe in 22, and to punish him, took the car away. We needed, a second car so I could take my child to counseling. Yeah. Our church stepped in, Revival Today, Jonathan Shuttlesworth, immediately within days. We had a nice SUV he got us, blessed us. So God consistently took care of all our needs. And the provision was a sign that, hey, just submit and let your husband lead it, which of course he's a great leader. So the hard part was, instead of collecting up some debt, just sell it and go. But we've stayed. And now, obviously, when they fire Jonathan, there's no income. We have no plan. A few pastors have helped us with, with checks. I'm so thankful. Even with Joni, you cross her, she'll cut you off of inheritance, any hope for the future. Yeah. But it's all worth it, because if you truly say that, God, you are my provider, those who fear the Lord, they will never go hungry. They will never lack. Of course, we have wisdom. We're both strong, well-abled. We'll get jobs as God shows us and leads us. So that's our plan. God, show us the next step for where we have to work, what we have to do, and we'll do it.
Yeah, throughout this whole process, it's amazing how God has sent strategic people to provide provision to be able to cover, the shortfall. So again, I just think, thank God,
I'm just so constantly amazed at you. And I just see the Spirit of the living God on your attitude, your heart. I see it. It's so, the truth is evident. I'm not understanding how a Canadian board member of Daystar has got the idea that you have been the problem, that you have been the rebellious one. And I did communicate back with him, that I don't see that in Jonathan at all. And this is actually our first time to see each other on camera. Our first time to speak was yesterday, and I reached out to you guys because I knew it was time, and I didn't want to be operating because I had a relationship with you. I wanted to see the truth for what it was, and that's why I held off reaching out to you sooner than yesterday, because I needed to step back and go, what am I seeing as an independent person? And I think that's what the world is seeing, is who you are. But this board member, basically, they must have this idea because this is what they're being told from the organization.
Yeah. Well,
and unfortunately, it's your mom, like Jonathan,
right.
I'm so sorry. It's 3 people called our 1-800 number crying. The lady told me they were crying, their mothers. They have sons in addiction. They have broken relationships. And they're like, this boy, like, you are a mother's dream. And all of this has happened. And I just honor you for that. But I am also very sorry, because this must be painful for your own mother to be speaking about you this way.
Yeah, I mean, someone that literally brought you into this world, you think that they would, this could never be a possibility, but unfortunately, that's just the way it is right now.
Let me ask the two of
Uh,
you. Oh, go ahead, Susie. You say first. I'll hold the question.
I just feel also deep down she knows that it's not the truth, and that's what makes me feel
Yeah.
peace. That she knows deep down, and she's right now in the fight of her life. She has to say whatever she has to say to
Yeah.
protect the most important thing in her life, which is the platform, the
Yeah.
ministry. And when we have our personal talks, that helps us cope. Because if it was true, it would hurt more. It's so far from the truth, and those who know this know this. And again, I would add, for everyone who believes Joni, when you sit and watch the show of her and her women together, I couldn't even watch. And for those who are convinced, Joni is an extremely convincing person. That's how I was fooled for over a decade. So we hold nothing against you if you believe it. Just ask God to give you eyes to see from His perspective,
Yeah.
not ours, not hers.
And, whenever you do get married to somebody,
Yeah.
the way God does marriage is to become one. And so my mother is obviously now a totally different person than she
Yeah.
was before she married Doug. And so I also factor that into the equation.
Very interesting. Two options that I presented, and I want to get your feedback. And you guys have been so generous with your time. This is amazing, and I think you're answering for the world a lot of questions. But my hopes were, okay, maybe Jonathan and his mom, Joni, can, as executives and as the main people of Daystar, you can somehow come together in a back room and say, listen, because I'm pretty concerned about the outfall, Jonathan. I've never seen anything like this in, my 25 years being in television. I've never seen the rage online towards what's going on and your mistreatment. The ring of truth is coming forward, and people are very upset by how you've been treated. And this can't be good for Daystar. It can't be good. So with Joni, even loving Daystar and the legacy of it, to me, if you and her got in a meeting where if she's not going to force you to read stuff, like the beginning of this broadcast, if she hadn't been forcing this, we would just go on. You'd go on. You'd say, well, I don't really agree with it, but you know what? We're going to be civil. Because lots of families do that. They're just civil to the family members where they don't agree. But Joni had to push it that extra mile. It's almost like an agenda. You must celebrate. You must show happiness. Why? Who needed? Why did she need that? And if that hadn't happened, like this might not be here. This is all about the control. So then I'm thinking, okay, if Joni were to say, listen, I probably went too far, Jonathan. I'm sorry. You know what? I look back at these recordings and I see that we were wrong. Wow, I did not see myself in that light. I repent before God. I love you as my son. And Suzy, let's it's going to take a while, but let's bring restoration. Then that was one option I presented, that you would have a united front as the Lamb family. And no one can stop that. No one. But the other option seems to be that this is spiraling. I don't know what you're seeing or feeling in the spirit, but people are saying to me behind the scenes that they don't know if Daystar survives this. And if that were the case, I would think that last-ditch effort, you need to remove the board that's been reprehensible in their treatment of you. All of it is just aberrant to God. But if they were to bring in a new board with accountability for the behavior and kind of bring things to a better place, then maybe there would be some sort of restoration. And/or, Suzy, you asked her, are you willing to give all of this up? And she said yes. Maybe this is the hour when she says, we had a good run. People are not receiving, because most of the world, I think, is not going to be very comfortable any longer with this marriage. and I'm sorry to keep talking long, I'm processing, I'm sorry. But if she were to then just go, you know what, Doug and I have a lot, and maybe they'll have a show together on Daystar. That's their, that would be the thing. But they would release the running and the control, and perhaps make way for your father's wishes, which was always, I believe, that you would eventually be the president of Daystar. And now I'll be quiet.
Yeah, Laura-Lynn, if this was just about the marriage and moving past that, I think that would definitely be a possibility. But when you find out that they had lied about shutting down the investigation, and that it was actually completed, and that was never completed, and that they lied that Pete was cleared when in fact he was never cleared, and about something that's so abhorrent, the essay of my daughter, I don't see how you can move past that.
I mean, all they would have to say is, we take responsibility, we shut it down, let law enforcement do what they need to do.
They would have to completely own that fact, and let the full investigation actually happen, and there'd have to be actual consequences for that, which I can't imagine what they would be, but that's, I think, one of the most disgraceful things that you could possibly do.
And then in terms of everything else you presented, I can't tell you how many times over the past year we've heard people, businessmen, practical people, say these things. And we have to always tell them, this is not just about marriage. Like I said, their accusations of us are what they're operating in. The power and control of platform of Daystar is the God. She said in the recording, I'll fight to the death for this. This is her Alamo.
Yeah.
She said, me and Doug will run this till Jesus comes. Yeah. And so, that's where Jonathan and I are like hands off, because Daystar is not ours. It's not hers.
And
God do.
And we lay it at the altar before the Lord. Yeah. Again, we do our part to share the truth, and God is ultimately in control, and we pray that His will be done.
Who's following you? Why is an SUV pulling up in front of your driveway? Why were private investigators following you? What is this about?
Laura, I think when you have a lot of money, but you don't have a lot of security, you end up doing things like that. And when you're afraid, you've got things that you've hid, and things that you've done that have been deceptive and manipulative. You have a fear that you might be uncovered. And I think that's just the monitoring spirit that wants to know every step that we're taking.
I had been very vocal on my Instagram, because I had been declaring that the truth will come out. It will come out. And that those were received as threats. So they wanted to keep tabs and see what's their plan for the truth to come out. Meanwhile, we were just sitting here praying, God, what do we do? There's a video of literally our son reading out the license plate number. The kids and I were having karaoke in the car on a Friday, about to drop them off at my parents' house for a sleepover. And Jonathan normally has so fun with the kids, but he was just on guard the whole time. Finally, he just doesn't, you don't know what's going on inside. Jonathan's not dramatic. Then he goes, we're being followed. And I'm just like, oh, what? And he goes, yeah. And so then this purple Camaro behind us is just coming so close to the bumper. Our kids are half laughing, half what? Then my son reads out the number. He followed us twice from our neighborhood. A few days later, Jonathan is so funny. He confronts this man. Jonathan went to go pick up a pizza.
I saw him 3 days later, the same purple.
Outside of pizza.
It was a Dodge Challenger.
Not a very good private investigator, Jonathan, right?
Yeah, it's a surprising color for a car that's a private investigator.
Intimidation.
But so.
Well, is it that, Suzy? Yeah,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Because I was told by others he would have stayed behind. He wanted to scare us. And Jonathan I would have never allowed Jonathan to confront him. I would be scared, but Jonathan did. I wasn't there.
How did you know to do that, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, I think I just lucked out, because he had been following me, and then I finally turned into a random parking lot. So then he finally quit following me. And then I think he got hungry, because he pulled right in front of Dickie's Barbecue. And so then I went from that parking lot to the Dickie's Barbecue. I blocked him in so he couldn't get out. And then I got out my phone and I just said, hey, who are you?
Who are you?
I'm an investigator. Who are you?
Who are you hired by?
I can't disclose that.
Okay. Well, I don't authorize you to follow me.
That's okay. We're on public streets. I can follow wherever I want to.
Okay. Well, thank you for confirming you're an investigator.
I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jameson. Have a good one.
And then he confirmed that he is a private investigator. And I said, I don't authorize you to follow me. He said, well, I can do that because it's public streets and it's my right. And it's like, who do you work for? He said, I can't disclose that. So we could send you that video as well if you'd like.
A little
Yes.
behind the scenes on that, because the rest of the night we were about to meet friends for dinner after dropping our kids off. We shook him off, and we were terrified. We were so scared, driving with hands shaking. I'm laughing now, but we were terrified that night. And not knowing what their plans are. But I'd love to thank our friends from the Trinity Foundation, because we built a friendship recently. Barry and Pete, they've been like so loving, like brothers to us. We sent them photos, sent them the video. Immediately, Barry found out the information from the license plate. He found the name of the guy, got all that information, which gave us peace of mind. And from there, we send them any suspicious activity. So again, all that to say, the goodness of God, He has provision through journalists. We've learned so much. I don't think we would have had the strength to move forward in telling our story without Candy. Candy
Candy Shan.
She wrote, yes.
She's adorable. And everyone can follow her on Twitter. For more information, follow Candy. Okay.
Spicy Sicilian, whatever I feel like I lost in, my mom and I are very close. We talk every day, hours. She prays over me, my mom and dad. But Candy, with being a journalist, she taught us. She also stepped in that role. And any video we've put out, it's because Candy's teaching us, hey, go tell the people what they need to hear. Stop hiding. Because Jonathan and I really, our hands have been shaking this whole process, but obeying God, and I'm thankful for direction and help. And
Wow. You called it the Daystar Mafia. Like that. Those are such serious. Like, this is really heartbreaking. I mean, okay, I just have to ask. Like, is Joni? Who else would be putting a private investigator on you?
No
Like-
one. I mean, I live. I'd say it's not a very exciting life. There's not really any dirt they could find on me or anything like that. So
Chick-fil-A.
I don't know.
And why a tracker on your vehicle? Like, you hear from the Holy Spirit to take a look at the surveillance cameras, security cameras of your building, and you literally at that moment see this security guard putting a tracker. So
I mean, the chances of me feeling my spirit to pull up the cameras at the exact moment, and there's like over 30 cameras, to have that camera pulled up of the security guard opening up my trunk, reaching his hand in and fiddling around the trunk area for a good 30 seconds. I was just like, he put something in my car. I just knew it. And then of course I took my car to the dealership the next day, and sure enough, they pulled out.
Oh, you have it? Oh, wow.
This is what they pulled out. That was in my car.
okay.
So that's the tracker they pulled out. And
Hope they don't try to break into our house, because now they know where it is.
Man.
Oh, Jesus, help.
Yes, help us, Lord. Really, Lord God. I mean, this is it. Honestly, it's just shocking. It's beyond the pale. You might have family difficulties. Your mom might not be happy because you're not accepting her marriage and fires you and all of that. But following and
All that started with Doug. I'll have to throw that in there. Like, this behavior we never witnessed any of this before this man.
Yeah, before Doug, there has never been any thought to have the executives or the family sign NDAs,
No.
putting trackers in cars, hiring private investigators to follow you. That was the first I'd ever known of anything like that to be used at Daystar.
right, and you had, you know, you would think that you would maybe have a memo. Oh, by the way, just expect we're putting trackers for you know, safety for everyone. You, at least at the very minimum, you'd be told.
Yeah, because they put out the narrative to cover their tracks when I found out, because they never expected me to find out there's a tracker in the car. But after I confronted our security guard, they quickly covered their bases by saying we're putting a tracker in all of the company vehicles, and we started doing that right after your father passed. But again, that's not true, because I have the actual expense report that shows them buying a tracker for the first time in Daystar's history, which is in October of 2023.
Could you tell about the call though? The day that he saw the camera, that later that day he called this man, Shannon Kelly. You want to tell about the phone call?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
He said in the fear
get into too much detail, but
he
I mean,
said in the
basically,
fear of the
I just
Lord.
confronted the security guy, like, hey, can you say before God,
Yeah.
did you put something in my car? And he said, oh, let me call you right back. I'm pretty sure he called Joni, said, hey,
Yeah.
remember, he reports to me.
He's
I'm
got
over
us.
security
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
He probably was like, hey, what should I do? Should I just lie or what? My mom probably said, just say you didn't do anything. We'll figure it out. So he calls me back and he says, no, I did not put anything in your car.
That's why I mentioned it, because time and again he said, no, we never did. So now them trying to act like this was a normal thing? No.
So godly. I don't know what to say, you guys. This is
even
sad.
Our phone calls. Our phone calls.
I only have like 3 more questions, and they're short. Suzy, one thing that you did say was that there was an assault against you as well. I talked with Joni the night that my first broadcast went up, and she said she just denied all of your allegations, and she said that was a very nice man. Now, he's passed, is my understanding, if I'm correct about that. But he's just a really nice man, and Suzy just makes stuff up.
That's crazy.
I believe you.
The man was belligerent for a while.
He showed up that day intoxicated.
Everyone was nervous with this Dr. Keith. I have no words. I cannot believe she said that. Wow. I thought she would at least, I mean, it's undeniable. I thought she would at least say, yeah, that was.
I remember clearly the trauma when Suzy called to tell me what had happened. And it's like she was just in shock, like that it actually had happened. And I just felt like such a rush of anger that this had happened. And so I called my parents. They were in Hawaii at the time. And my dad was just like, okay, we'll take care of it. So taking care of it was basically, we will pay this guy off. They paid him a nice sum of money and probably had him sign an NDA. I don't know for sure.
No, I think just his last payment, maybe.
And then they sent him on his way, and that was the last time he was on their property.
Paid him after he assaulted the daughter-in-law. Like, why not call the police and get him reported and go through an investigation?
Well, and again, that just shows you, because Suzy was not comfortable to even share that story. She did not want to have to share. But given that our daughter's story was out there, Suzy wanted to stand in solidarity with our daughter. And again, it also just shows the pattern of cover-up at Daystar. You know, it's better just to kind of turn a blind eye to this. It's better not to report it because of what could happen if you do report it. It could obviously bring attention, and it could, they just didn't want to have that blowback.
I'd like to add one thing. I'll say this because hearing that is obviously heartbreaking. Because I remember when she came back from Hawaii and they pretended like nothing ever happened. So I was expecting a conversation. So I said, "Is Marcus mad?" She goes, "Oh yeah, that was not okay. But let's not talk about it. I got to protect you. I've got to protect Daystar. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." But we paid him off. Marcus paid him, and he's gone. You won't see him again. And I thought that I genuinely believed that was their protection for me. I didn't see Daystar as a factor. I just thought they did what was right for me. And I was okay with it. I remember 2 or 3 days later, Rachel was really angry. And I don't want to be vindictive in saying this story, but there's a point for me saying this. She said, look what we've lost because of you. Great. And I remember going home and crying because I was like, I didn't want them to lose anything. Yeah. I didn't know.
What did she mean? They lost massages? because you reported.
They lost the convenience because he would come up to Daystar
Yeah, the chiropractic.
and he'd be able to
adjustment.
give adjustments, from the convenience of just
Sure,
going
and lots of companies do that. Like it's a benefit, right?
Yeah.
Part of the benefit
Absolutely.
is not having a drunk guy sexually, SA, on company dollars, and then they get away with it, and it's covered over. This seems to be part of the whole problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned what Rachel said because I saw all my friends sending me messages last night. Rachel went on a tirade, posting a whole full false story, a whole narrative. I can't even read it, about Whole Foods and me mumbling at a grocery store. These things are so completely out of nowhere. Some of my friends were like, Suzy, I want to cry, but then other friends were like, I want to laugh. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Who are these people? I bring that up now because it all makes sense. If Joni told you that he was a good man, then it all makes sense. I know other people.
Those were her exact words. Yeah.
Wow. See, so I told you, Joni and Rachel are the same person. So they will make everything else to their reality to paint me as crazy. And thank God for good people like Candy who warned me, no level is too low, but my hope and my trust and justice is from the Lord. Psalm 37. And I know he will bring that to completion. I know it.
Amen. Hey, Suzy, Jonathan, thank you for this amazing time. You are outstanding. Suzy, what do you love most about Jonathan?
The thing that when I first met him, I wasn't sure because he was so quiet, and I really wanted to get more out of him. And I'd ask him, what are your dreams and your visions? And he'd always say, I'm going to serve my Father, and we'll see what God opens. And but the thing that stood out to me, we never talked about Daystar, but it was his humility. And my mom and dad too, they loved the most humble, gentle heart. He, everyone else in a world of people wanting position and power, he wouldn't even use his assistant. He would, do all his own chores. I'm the only person who didn't have a Daystar credit card in his family because the way we did our finances, one quick example, my dad was so proud of Jonathan because Jonathan was over Daystar's finances, and he would have to approve them. And my dad was the director of the prayer department before Joni fired him. Supposed to be on his 70th birthday. Yeah. For not
fired on his 70th birthday. Your dad.
It's okay. But I'm laughing, but it was horrible. I cried a lot, but I'm laughing now because
I bet.
But my dad was telling me how Jonathan was so honorable at his job. One day, my dad's assistant bought him a bottle of NyQuil because my dad was sick, not feeling well. And she bought it with a company card. And, my dad didn't realize. He just took the medicine. And then later, Jonathan goes through all the receipts of the whole company. And he finds his $4 charge. And he calls my dad, Jay, I see a $4 charge for NyQuil. Isn't that a personal? And my dad was like, oh, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, of course. And, my dad paid it back. But my dad said, I love. I call Jonathan, he has the eyes of an owl. I mean, he can find the tiniest little things. And I
so much integrity.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We couldn't even make prank calls when we were dating because Jonathan would call them back and say, I'm so sorry.
Guilty.
That was me and my girlfriend.
It was fun, but I feel bad after.
So I love the purity of his heart.
Jonathan, what do you love about Suzy?
Well, for her, for us to take the stand that we've taken, obviously what we've given up, you have to be in complete alignment. Think about it, obviously, a woman's greatest need is security. And for her to say, hey, we can sell the house, we can give up our luxurious lifestyle that we've been blessed with, obviously, for working at the ministry that's been very blessed, all for being able to stand on the truth of the word of God and not having to give up on our convictions. The fact that she was willing to take that stand, alongside me, there are very few people in this world that would probably, at the end of the day, be willing to do that. But that just shows you the level of conviction and to not bow or compromise in any way like that she has. So that to me is just incredible. Not to mention, she's just fun to do life with. She's just got a great personality.
And she's pretty cute, Jonathan.
Oh, that goes without saying, of course.
Yeah, she's beautiful. Beautiful. You're beautiful inside and out, Suzy. That's, I think, the most beautiful about you is your integrity, your authenticity, your kindness, your desire for God's heart. Both of you have that. I would venture to say that there's a lot of people that would compromise. And someone told me this, and I never forgot it. They said, whatever you compromise to keep, you will eventually lose. So anyone in this situation who is compromising to keep something, God is watching. And you are amazing. You are a beautiful couple. I will just say right now that I am asking the Lord to bring restitution and reinstatement, that you would bring credibility, integrity, character back to Daystar where there has been a breach in the wall, that you would be the couple that would bring that back to your rightful place in Daystar. And may the Lord restore sevenfold for what the enemy has tried to steal from you. So whether that's in Daystar or a new thing, I'm praying that you're somehow able to save this, because the loss of trust in everything else is now thundering in the nations. It's thundering. The people online, I don't know if you've gone to Jimmy Evans' Facebook page, but that thing should probably be shut down, Jimmy, because we can all see the comments, and you're not loved right now because people see the truth. May God restore, and for everyone, doesn't have God has restoration for every person in this situation, for Joni, Doug, Jimmy Evans, for yourselves, but the way that you've been treated is bringing the downfall. The treatment of Jonathan and Suzy is bringing the downfall. Have we said everything that we can say today, guys? Is there any last things?
Well, I guess, I'd just like to close with a scripture. So Ezekiel 33:6. But if the watchman sees the enemy coming and doesn't sound the alarm to warn the people, he is responsible for their captivity. They will die in their sins, but I will hold the watchman responsible for their deaths.
Wow.
So again, I feel like I've done my duty to be the watchman, and so I can't be held accountable for the deaths I sounded the alarm.
My goodness.
Amen.
Whew.
Yeah, I feel that too, Suzy, right? And your dad talked about the watchman, and people are coming to your defense. I stand with you, as do millions and millions of people. We love you. You are precious. You're amazing.
Thank you, Laura-Lynn.
You're extraordinary. And I'm honored that I had this time with you. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you so much. God bless you,
God
Laura.
bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today for this extraordinary story. It's not an easy story. I do pray and ask you to pray that there would be justice, repentance, and reconciliation. That would be the optimum end result. However, may God, in His sovereignty, work this out according to His purpose. I do pray personally that there will be others that God is calling to intervene, to stand strong. And I pray that those who are called as Esthers and Mordecais in this situation to speak, because God, in justice, will not spare those who lack courage. Thank you for joining us.